I still remember the weight of that envelope in my hands. It was so light, almost nothing, really, just paper and ink, but somehow it felt heavier than anything I'd ever held before. My sisters were already counting their millions across the mahogany table, champagne glasses clinking, designer heels tapping against the hardwood floor of the attorney's office. And there I was, 32 years old, clutching a dusty letter that looked like it had been forgotten in some drawer for decades. Let me back up. I need to tell you how I got here, to this moment where everything I thought I knew about my life was about to shatter like glass. My name is Rebecca, and I was always the invisible daughter, not in some dramatic Cinderella kind of way. More like the background character in someone else's story. My older sister, Victoria, got the beauty and the charm. My younger sister, Amanda, got the rebellious spirit and the attention that comes with it. And me? I got the middle spot, the forgettable position, the one who just existed between the two stars of our family show. Growing up in the Henderson household meant understanding your place. Our father, Thomas Henderson, built a real estate empire from absolutely nothing. He came from a town so small it didn't even have a stoplight, worked 3 jobs to put himself through college, and turned a single apartment building into a portfolio worth over $50 million. He was the kind of man who commanded attention when he walked into a room. 6'3", silver hair always perfectly combed, voice like rolling thunder when he wanted it to be. Our mother died when I was 7. Cancer took her fast, too fast for any of us to really process it. I have these fragments of memories, you know? Her perfume, something floral that I can never quite identify when I smell it in department stores. Her laugh, this bright sound that made everything feel safe, the way she'd braid my hair every morning before school, her fingers gentle and patient. After she died, Dad threw himself into work. And we 3 girls? We learned to navigate the world without her. Victoria was 14, already beautiful and aware of it. She became the woman of the house, or at least she tried to. Amanda was only 4, barely old enough to remember Mom at all. She clung to our nanny, Maria, like a lifeline. Me? I became quiet. I became the good one. The one who didn't cause trouble, didn't demand attention, didn't rock the boat. I got straight A's not because I was particularly brilliant, but because it was expected, and I was terrified of disappointing anyone. I played piano because Dad said it was a good skill for a young lady. I volunteered at the library because it looked good on college applications. I did everything right, everything expected, everything safe. By the time I was in high school, the pattern was set. Victoria was dating the captain of the football team, wearing designer clothes Dad bought her, planning to study fashion merchandising at NYU. Amanda was getting suspended for dyeing her hair purple and starting a garage band. And I was taking AP courses, tutoring other kids after school, and coming home to an empty house because Dad was always at the office and my sisters were always somewhere more interesting. I remember this one night, junior year. I just found out I got accepted to Princeton with a partial scholarship. I was so excited, so proud. I waited up until almost midnight for Dad to come home, briefcase in hand, tie loosened, practicing what I'd say, imagining his reaction. When he finally walked through the door, I practically ran to him. Rebecca. Dad, I got into Princeton, and they offered me a scholarship for academic merit. My father looked at me for a long moment, and I saw something flicker in his eyes. Pride? Maybe. But also something else, something that looked almost like sadness. Thomas. That's wonderful, Becca. Really wonderful. Princeton is a fine school. He patted my shoulder, the same way you might pat a dog who did a good trick. Then he went to his study and closed the door. I stood in the hallway for probably 10 minutes, listening to him on the phone talking about a property acquisition, my acceptance letter still clutched in my hand. Victoria threw a huge party when she got into NYU. Dad rented out an entire restaurant. When Amanda got accepted to Berkeley 3 years later, despite her terrible grades because she submitted some experimental art portfolio, Dad flew the whole family out to California to tour the campus. For my Princeton acceptance, we had dinner at home. Maria made pot roast. Dad said congratulations once. Victoria complained about the food making her bloated. Amanda was on her phone the entire time. I learned something that night. I learned that being good, being reliable, being the daughter who never caused problems, meant being the daughter who didn't get noticed. And I carried that lesson with me for the next 14 years. College was supposed to be my escape, my chance to reinvent myself. I was going to be different at Princeton, confident, outgoing, someone who mattered. But old habits are hard to break. I studied international relations, graduated summa cum laude, and was just as invisible there as I'd been at home. I had friends, sure, but they were quiet like me. We studied together, went to occasional parties where we stood in corners drinking cheap beer, and congratulated each other on our grades like they were the only things that mattered. After graduation, I did exactly what was expected. I got a job at a nonprofit organization that helped resettle refugees. The pay was terrible, barely enough to cover rent on my tiny studio apartment in Queens, but it was meaningful work. Dad nodded approvingly when I told him, said something about civic duty and giving back. Then he wrote Victoria a check for $200,000 to start her boutique fashion consulting business. Victoria's business thrived, of course. She had Dad's business sense and Mom's eye for beauty. Within 3 years, she was consulting for major department stores, flying to Milan and Paris, posting pictures on Instagram from penthouse suites and fashion shows. She got engaged to Bradley, a hedge fund manager whose watch probably cost more than my annual salary. Their wedding was featured in a glossy magazine. Amanda bounced around for a while after Berkeley. She tried to make it as an artist, lived in a warehouse in Oakland with other creative types, spent Dad's money on supplies and studio space, and elaborate installations that never quite sold. Eventually, she pivoted to art therapy, got a master's degree that Dad paid for, and started a practice in Santa Monica working with traumatized kids. She was good at it, really good. She had this way of connecting with people that I envied, this rawness and authenticity that drew people in. And me? I spent 5 years at the nonprofit, then moved to a better-paying job at an international development agency. I worked on education programs in East Africa, coordinating grants and partnerships from behind a desk in Manhattan. I was good at my job. Competent, reliable, forgettable. I dated sometimes. There was Marcus, an accountant I met at a work conference. We dated for 2 years, had the same conversations over and over, watched Netflix on weekends, and eventually drifted apart because neither of us cared enough to fight for it. There was David, a high school teacher with kind eyes and a gentle manner. We lasted almost 3 years, got as far as looking at engagement rings, but when he proposed on a beach vacation in Mexico, something inside me just froze. I said I needed time to think about it. He waited 6 months, then found someone else who didn't need time. The truth was, I didn't know how to let anyone in. I'd spent so long being the invisible daughter, the reliable one, the one who didn't need anything, that I'd forgotten how to need people. Or maybe I'd never learned in the first place. I saw my family mainly on holidays. Thanksgiving at Dad's estate in Connecticut, where Victoria would bring Bradley and they'd talk about their latest vacation to St. Bart's. Christmas, where Amanda would show up late with some new boyfriend who had interesting facial hair and strong opinions about capitalism. Easter brunch, 4th of July barbecues, the occasional birthday dinner. Dad and I would have these surface-level conversations about my work. He'd nod politely when I talked about literacy programs in Uganda or girls' education initiatives in Nepal, but I could see his eyes glaze over. These things didn't have quarterly earnings reports or profit margins. They didn't make sense in his world. I never blamed him for loving my sisters more. How could I? Victoria was everything he valued in business. Smart, strategic, charming, ruthless when she needed to be. Amanda was everything Mom had been. Creative, passionate, full of life. I was just the dutiful middle child who sent him a card on his birthday and called every other Sunday because it seemed like the right thing to do. Then, 3 months ago, everything changed. I was at work editing a grant proposal that was already boring me to tears when my phone rang. Unknown number. I almost didn't answer, but something made me pick up. Attorney Stevens. Is this Rebecca Henderson? Rebecca. Yes, speaking. Attorney Stevens. Ms. Henderson, this is Robert Stevens from Stevens & Associates. I'm calling regarding your father, Thomas Henderson. I'm very sorry to inform you that he passed away last night. He had a heart attack in his home office. The housekeeper found him this morning. The words didn't make sense at first. They were just sounds, syllables strung together in an order that my brain couldn't process. Dad was 68, healthy, still working 12-hour days. He'd just sent me an email 2 days ago about a property development in Boston, asking if I knew anything about the neighborhood demographics. Rebecca. I'm sorry, what? My father? Thomas Henderson? There must be some mistake. Attorney Stevens. I'm afraid not, Ms. Henderson. I've been your father's attorney for over 20 years. He listed you as one of his primary contacts in case of emergency. Your sisters have already been notified. Of course they had been. They were probably already on planes, already making arrangements, already stepping into their roles as the important daughters. I left work in a daze. I don't remember the subway ride home or packing a bag. I just remember calling my boss from Penn Station, telling her there was a family emergency, and boarding the train to Connecticut with no clear sense of where I was going or what I was supposed to do when I got there. The funeral was exactly what you'd expect for a man like Thomas Henderson. Hundreds of people, most of whom I'd never met. Business associates, politicians, charity board members, country club friends. They all said the same things about what a great man he was, what a legacy he'd left, how he'd be missed. Victoria stood in the front row of the church looking like she'd stepped out of a fashion magazine, even in mourning. Black Chanel suit, perfect makeup, diamond studs that Dad had given her for her 30th birthday. She cried elegantly, dabbing at her eyes with a silk handkerchief while Bradley held her hand. Amanda wore black jeans and a vintage band t-shirt under a blazer, her way of compromising with formality. She didn't cry during the service. She just stared straight ahead, jaw clenched, like she was angry at the universe for taking him. I wore a simple black dress I'd bought at Macy's 5 years ago. I cried, but quietly, the way I did everything. Proper tears that didn't make noise or draw attention. After the burial, there was a reception at Dad's house. The estate looked the same as it always had, imposing and cold despite the expensive furniture and artwork. Maria, who still worked for Dad after all these years, had organized everything perfectly. Catered food, an open bar, fresh flowers in every room. People kept coming up to me, telling me how sorry they were, asking how I was holding up. I smiled and nodded and said thank you at least 200 times. I felt like I was watching myself from outside my body, going through the motions of grief without really feeling anything. It wasn't until everyone left, until it was just me and my sisters and Maria cleaning up in the kitchen, that it hit me. Dad was really gone. The man who'd been the center of our family, the gravitational force we all orbited around, even when we pretended we didn't. He was just gone, and I'd never told him that I needed him to see me. I'd never told him that all those years of being good and quiet and reliable were really just me begging for his attention in the only way I knew how. I locked myself in the bathroom and cried until my throat hurt, until my eyes were swollen, until there was nothing left. Amanda knocked once, asked if I was okay. I said I was fine, because that's what I always said. The will reading was scheduled for 2 weeks later. Stevens wanted to give us time to grieve, to handle the immediate aftermath. Victoria flew back to Boston. Amanda went to California. I took a leave of absence from work and stayed in my apartment, ordering takeout and watching reality TV and trying not to think about anything at all. When the day came, I took the train back to Connecticut. The meeting was at Stevens and Associates, a law firm in one of those old buildings downtown that screamed old money and tradition. Dark wood paneling, leather chairs, bookshelves full of legal volumes that probably hadn't been opened in decades. We gathered in a conference room, me and Victoria and Amanda. Bradley was there too, sitting next to Victoria with his hand on her knee. Amanda had brought her latest boyfriend, a guy named River who claimed to be a sound healer. Stevens had politely asked them to wait outside. This was for immediate family only. Attorney Stevens: Thank you all for coming. I know this is a difficult time, but your father was very clear about his wishes. He updated his will 6 months ago, and I'll be executing it exactly as he specified. 6 months ago, that caught my attention. Dad had updated his will 6 months ago and hadn't mentioned it to any of us. Stevens opened a folder and began reading. The legal language washed over me at first. All those whereas clauses and aforementioned statements. But then he got to the specifics, and I started paying attention. Attorney Stevens: To my daughter Victoria Henderson, I leave the sum of $15 million and the property portfolio designated as Collection A, which includes the commercial buildings in Boston, New York, and Miami. I trust she will manage these assets with the business acumen she has already demonstrated. Victoria gasped. $15 million, plus properties worth probably another $20 million. She grabbed Bradley's hand, and I saw tears in her eyes, but they looked different from the tears at the funeral. These were tears of joy, of validation, of winning. Attorney Stevens: To my daughter Amanda Henderson, I leave the sum of $12 million and the residential property portfolio designated as Collection B, which includes the beach house in Malibu, the cabin in Aspen, and the brownstone in Brooklyn. I hope these properties bring her the peace and creative inspiration she seeks. Amanda let out a breath that sounded almost like a laugh. $12 million. Properties she could live in, rent out, sell, whatever she wanted. She was set for life. I did the math in my head. 15 million plus 12 million was 27 million. Dad's estate was valued at approximately 50 million. That left 23 million. Maybe there were charitable donations, or taxes, or I don't know, something. I wasn't expecting anything, really. I'd made peace with being the forgotten daughter. I had my job, my little apartment, my simple life. I didn't need Dad's money. I'd never needed it. Attorney Stevens. To my daughter, Rebecca Henderson, I leave the contents of my personal safe, including all documents, letters, and personal effects therein. That's it. That's all he said. Victoria and Amanda were looking at me with something between pity and confusion. Stevens was watching me carefully, like he was waiting for a reaction. Rebecca. I'm sorry, what? The contents of his safe? What does that mean? Attorney Stevens. Your father maintained a personal safe in his study. He left specific instructions that only you were to receive its contents. He also left this letter for you, to be read before the safe is opened. He slid an envelope across the table. My name was written on it in Dad's handwriting. That distinctive script I'd seen on birthday cards and Christmas checks, and exactly one note he'd left on my dorm room desk when he visited Princeton, telling me he was proud of me for making Dean's List. My hands were shaking as I picked it up. Victoria was already on her phone, probably texting Bradley, who was waiting outside, about her inheritance. Amanda was staring out the window, that faraway look she got when she was processing something big. Attorney Stevens. The rest of Mr. Henderson's estate, including liquid assets and the remaining properties, will be donated to various charities as specified in the will. He left very detailed instructions about the distribution. The rest, probably $23 million, going to charity. Dad had always donated to various causes, but this was different. This was almost half his estate. Victoria. Wait, he's giving $20 million to charity? Just like that? Attorney Stevens. Mr. Henderson believed strongly in philanthropy. He made his wishes very clear. Victoria looked offended, like Dad had personally insulted her by not giving her every penny. Amanda looked thoughtful, nodding slowly like this made sense to her somehow. And me? I was still holding the envelope, feeling that weight again. Heavier than paper should be. We left the office together, but we weren't really together. Victoria was calling her financial advisor before we even got to the parking lot. Amanda hugged me, this fierce, tight hug that surprised me. Amanda. Whatever's in that letter, Becca, it's going to be important. Dad didn't do anything without a reason. Rebecca. He left me the contents of a safe. You guys got millions of dollars. I think we all know who he really valued. Amanda. Money isn't the same as value. You know that, right? I didn't know that, actually. In our family, money had always been how Dad showed love. He bought Victoria a car when she graduated high school. He paid for Amanda's art studio. He wrote checks because checks were easier than words, easier than showing up, easier than really seeing us. I went back to the estate alone. Victoria and Bradley were already planning their celebration dinner. Amanda and River were heading to some meditation retreat in the Berkshires. I used the key Maria had given me and let myself into the empty house. It was late afternoon, that strange time when the light comes through windows at odd angles and makes everything look unfamiliar. I walked through rooms I'd known my whole life, and they felt like a museum now. Dad's house, but not a home. It had never really been a home, not since Mom died. His study was on the second floor, overlooking the gardens that a landscaping crew maintained even though Dad barely looked at them. The room smelled like leather and old books, and the expensive scotch he kept in a crystal decanter. The safe was behind a painting of a fox hunt, because of course it was. Dad had shown us where it was years ago, told us the combination was our mother's birthday. He kept important documents in there, he said. Passports, titles, legal papers. I moved the painting aside, its frame heavy in my hands. The safe was built into the wall, black metal with a digital keypad. I entered Mom's birthday, 7023, July 23rd. The safe beeped and the lock clicked open. Inside was exactly what Stevens had said. Documents, letters, personal effects. I pulled everything out and spread it on Dad's desk, that massive oak thing he'd bought at an estate sale when I was a kid. There were folders, neatly labeled in Dad's handwriting. Financial records, property deeds, insurance policies, and then there was a box, wooden about the size of a shoebox, with a small brass latch. I opened the letter Stevens had given me first. My hands were still shaking. I don't know what I expected. Maybe a final disappointment, a confirmation that I'd never mattered as much as my sisters. Maybe an explanation for why I got legal documents while they got millions. The letter was 3 pages long, handwritten, dated 6 months earlier. Dad's handwriting was shakier than I remembered, but still legible. My dearest Rebecca, it began. If you're reading this, I'm gone. I'm sorry I won't be there to explain this in person, to see your face when you understand. But I've never been good with words, especially the important ones, and I'm afraid I'd lose my courage if I tried to tell you while I was alive. I've given your sisters money and property because that's what they need, what they understand. Victoria has my business mind. She'll turn her inheritance into twice as much within 10 years. Amanda has your mother's creative soul. She'll use the properties as a base, a foundation to build the life she wants. They'll be fine. They've always known how to take what they need from the world. But you, Rebecca, you were always different. You were always more. Do you remember the night you told me about Princeton? You were so excited, so proud, and I barely reacted. I saw the light dim in your eyes, and I hated myself for it. But the truth is, I was terrified. You were so much like your mother, not in the ways Amanda is, with the creativity and passion, but in the ways that matter more. You had her kindness, her genuine goodness, her ability to care about things that don't have profit margins. Your mother made me a better person, Rebecca. Before her, I was just a kid from nowhere trying to prove I was somebody. I built this empire because I thought success meant money and power. But she taught me that success means living a life that matters, that helps people, that leaves the world better than you found it. When she died, I forgot those lessons. I threw myself back into work because it was easier than feeling the loss. And I failed you. I failed all three of you. But I failed you most of all because you needed something different than your sisters. You needed to be seen. I see you now, Rebecca. I see the work you do, the lives you touch, the difference you make. I read every report you've ever sent me about your projects. I kept them all. They're in the box. I know about the school in Uganda that serves 200 girls now because you secured funding. I know about the literacy program in Nepal that's teaching grandmothers to read. I know about the scholarship fund you started with your own money you barely had, to help refugee kids go to college. You think I never noticed you, but I noticed everything. I just didn't know how to tell you that what you were doing mattered more than all my real estate deals combined. In the box, you'll find your mother's journals. She kept them from the time she was 16 until a week before she died. I've never had the courage to read them all. They're hers, her thoughts and dreams and fears. But I know she'd want you to have them. You're the daughter most like her in the ways that count. You'll also find letters. Letters I wrote to you over the years but never sent. Letters where I tried to explain why I was the way I was, why I couldn't seem to show you how much you mattered. Reading them now, they sound like excuses, but maybe they'll help you understand. There's also a key. It opens a safety deposit box at First National Bank, account number on the attached card. Inside that box, you'll find documents related to the Henderson Foundation. I established it 3 years ago, funded it with $30 million, and set it up to support exactly the kind of work you've been doing your whole career. Education, refugee services, international development. Rebecca, I'm leaving you the foundation. Not the money itself, that's in a trust, but the control of it. You'll be the executive director, with full authority to decide how those funds are distributed, what projects to support, how to make the biggest impact. This is your inheritance. Not money to spend on yourself, but resources to change lives. It's worth more than what I gave your sisters, but in a different way. They got what they needed. You're getting what you deserve. I know I should have told you all this when I was alive. I should have pulled you aside years ago and told you how proud I am of you. How you turned out to be exactly the kind of person your mother hoped you'd be. How every time I saw you choosing meaning over money, purpose over profit, I wanted to tell you that you were right, that you'd figured out something it took me a lifetime to learn. But I was a coward. I am a coward. So I'm telling you now, in a letter you'll read when I can't see your reaction, when I can't face your questions or your anger or your tears. You were never invisible, Rebecca. You were always the daughter who shined brightest. I just didn't have the courage to tell you while I could still hold your hand and say I'm sorry for making you feel like you didn't matter. Please forgive me. Please use the foundation to do all the good I should have done. Please know that you were loved, even when I was too broken to show it properly. Your mother would be so proud of you. I am so proud of you. Love, always. Dad. I read it 3 times. Then I read it again. My tears were falling on the paper, smudging the ink, and I couldn't stop them. $30 million. A foundation. Control over resources that could fund programs for decades. This wasn't about being forgotten. This was about being seen in a way I'd never imagined. I opened the wooden box with shaking hands. Inside were the journals, 12 of them, spanning my mother's life from teenager to mother to the woman facing her own mortality. Her handwriting was elegant, looping, full of life even on the page. Underneath the journals were letters. Dozens of them, maybe 100, in envelopes addressed to me but never stamped, never sent. I opened one at random. Dear Rebecca, it started. You're 8 years old today, and I missed your birthday dinner because I was closing a deal in Chicago. You said it was okay when I called, said you understood, but I heard the disappointment in your voice, and I hate myself for putting it there. I want you to know that the deal wasn't more important than you. Nothing is more important than you. I just don't know how to show up the way you need me to. I'm trying to build something, to create security for our family, but I'm missing the life I'm supposedly securing. I'm sorry. I love you more than I know how to express. Maybe someday I'll be brave enough to tell you in person. Another letter from when I was in college. Dear Rebecca, you called today to tell me about your internship at the UN. You're going to spend your summer helping resettle Syrian refugees. I could hear the passion in your voice, the purpose. You found something that matters to you, something real. I wanted to tell you how much I admire that, how you're better than me in every way that counts. But instead, I asked about the pay, made some comment about building your resume. I saw your enthusiasm fade. I felt you pull away. Why do I keep doing this? Why can't I just tell you that you're amazing exactly as you are? There were more. Letters from every phase of my life, my high school graduation, college, my first job. Each one full of pride and regret and love he could never quite express to my face. And at the bottom of the box was the key and a business card for First National Bank with an account number written on the back. I sat in Dad's chair, surrounded by his words and Mom's journals, and the weight of an inheritance I'd never expected. Outside, the sun was setting, painting the study in shades of orange and gold. For 32 years, I'd believed I was invisible. I'd built my entire identity around being the daughter who didn't matter, the one who had to earn love through being good and quiet and never needing anything. I'd chosen a career that mattered but kept me safely in the background. I'd dated men I never let get too close. I'd lived small because I believed small was all I deserved. But Dad had seen me. He'd been watching the whole time, collecting evidence of my life like precious artifacts. And Mom, who I barely remembered, had left me her most private thoughts, trusting that I'd understand them in ways my sisters might not. I called Amanda first. She answered on the third ring, wind noise in the background. She was probably driving to that retreat with River. Rebecca. He left me a foundation, $30 million in a foundation to support international development and education programs. There was a long silence. Then Amanda laughed, this joyful sound. Amanda. Of course he did. God, Becca. That's so perfectly Dad. Give Victoria and me money we'll spend on ourselves. Give you the tools to change the world. Rebecca. Did you know about the foundation? Amanda. No, but it makes sense. You know what he told me once, at your college graduation? He said you were going to do more good in the world than he ever did. He said it like it was obvious, like everyone could see it. Rebecca. Then why didn't he tell me? Why did he make me feel like I didn't matter? Amanda. Because he was human, Becca, and damaged, and scared of his own emotions. But he loved you. We all knew that. I think you're the only one who didn't. After we hung up, I called Victoria. She was at dinner, noise and laughter in the background. Rebecca, I need to tell you something about Dad's will. There was more than what was read in the office. I explained the foundation, the letters, all of it. Victoria listened without interrupting, and when I finished, she was quiet for a moment. Victoria, 30 million? He gave you control of $30 million? Rebecca, it's not mine to spend on myself. It's for the foundation, for programs and grants. Victoria, but you control where it goes. That's enormous power, Becca. That's real influence. And honestly, you'll probably do more good with it than I'll do with my 15 million and a bunch of buildings. Rebecca, you're not upset? Victoria, why would I be upset? I got exactly what I wanted. Money to invest, properties to manage, resources to build with. You got what you needed, something that matters. Dad knew us better than we thought. That night, I stayed in the estate. I couldn't bear to leave yet. I read Mom's journals until 3 a.m, learning about the woman I barely remembered. She wrote about her dreams of changing the world, of using Dad's success to fund meaningful causes. She wrote about each of her daughters, about how she saw our different gifts. About me, when I was 5 years old, she wrote, Rebecca has this careful way of being in the world. She watches everything, notices things others miss. Yesterday, she spent an hour helping a lost butterfly find its way outside. She was so gentle with it, so patient. She's going to be the kind of person who sees suffering and can't look away. I hope the world doesn't harden that out of her. I cried reading that because Mom had been right. The world had tried to harden me, and I'd let it. I'd let Dad's emotional distance convince me I needed to be smaller, quieter, less. But that wasn't who I was supposed to be. The next morning, I drove to First National Bank with the key. The safety deposit box was small but heavy. Inside were the foundation documents, just as Dad had said. Articles of incorporation, tax exemption papers, financial statements showing $30 million in investments, generating approximately $1.5 million in annual income to distribute. There was also a letter from Dad's financial advisor, explaining that I had full discretion over grant decisions, that there was a small board of trustees but I had controlling vote, that I could hire staff or manage it myself, that this was truly mine to run as I saw fit. I sat in the bank's private viewing room, looking at these documents that represented more responsibility than I'd ever imagined having. $30 million. How many schools could that build? How many teachers could it train? How many lives could it change? The thought terrified me. I'd spent my whole career working with other people's money, writing grants, managing programs with tight budgets and constant oversight. This was different. This was real power, real potential for impact, or real potential to fail spectacularly. I thought about calling my boss asking for advice. Then I realized I didn't work there anymore. Not really. This was my work now. I took another leave of absence, this time indefinite. I told my director about the foundation, about the opportunity. She was excited for me, understood completely. The nonprofit world is small. We all know each other, and we all dream about having resources like this to work with. Over the next month, I threw myself into understanding the foundation. I reviewed every document, met with Dad's financial team, learned about the investment strategy. The money was well managed, conservative investments that would preserve the principal while generating steady income. I also started going through the letters Dad had written but never sent. There were 107 of them, spanning 24 years. Each one was a window into a man I'd never really known. A father who loved his daughter but didn't know how to bridge the gap between them. Some were short, just a paragraph about missing a school event or wishing he'd said something different in a conversation. Others were long, rambling things where he tried to explain his own childhood, his father who was distant and critical, the patterns he'd inherited without meaning to. In one letter, written when I was 25, he wrote, "I see you building this beautiful life of meaning and purpose, and I'm so afraid I'll somehow corrupt it. Everything I touch turns to money and business deals. I don't want that for you. You're the one good thing I've created that stayed good. So I keep my distance, not because I don't love you, but because I love you too much to ruin you with my presence." Reading that broke something open in me. Dad hadn't been distant because he didn't care. He'd been distant because he cared too much and didn't trust himself not to damage what he loved. It was twisted logic, traumatized thinking, but it was his truth. I started therapy, 32 years old, and it was my first time sitting in a therapist's office, talking about my childhood, my patterns, the ways I'd learned to make myself small. Dr. Chen was patient and kind, a woman in her 50s with kind eyes and a way of asking questions that made you think deeper than you wanted to. The first session was brutal. I sat on her couch, clutching a throw pillow, and tried to explain why I was there. I thought I'd talk about Dad, about the letters, about the foundation. Instead, I started crying about the Princeton acceptance letter, about standing in that hallway 32 years ago, waiting for my father to care. "Dr. Chen, tell me about that moment. What did you need from him?" "Rebecca, I needed him to see me, to really see me. Not just acknowledge my achievement, but to understand what it meant. I'd worked so hard, not just for the acceptance, but for years before that. Every A on every test, every extra credit assignment, every volunteer hour. It was all for him, and he just patted my shoulder and walked away. Dr. Chen, what would it have looked like if he'd given you what you needed?" I closed my eyes, imagining it. Dad putting down his briefcase, Dad pulling me into a hug, Dad calling Maria to open champagne, calling my sisters to share the news. Rebecca. He would have been excited, proud. He would have made me feel like I mattered as much as Victoria's beauty or Amanda's creativity. He would have thrown me a party too. Dr. Chen. And because he didn't? Rebecca. Because he didn't, I learned that my kind of success didn't count, that being smart and hardworking and responsible wasn't worth celebrating. So I kept being those things, kept achieving, but I stopped expecting anyone to notice. I made myself smaller and smaller until I almost disappeared. The sessions continued weekly. Dr. Chen helped me trace the patterns back further than Dad. She asked about my mother, about those fragment memories I carried. I told her about the time, maybe a month before Mom died, when I'd found her crying in the garden. I was only 6, didn't understand what cancer meant, didn't know she was dying. I just knew my mother was sad, and I wanted to fix it. Rebecca. I picked flowers for her. Dandelions mostly because they were the only ones I could reach. I brought her this messy bouquet and she stopped crying. She pulled me into her lap and told me I had the kindest heart she'd ever known. She said I was going to grow up to help people, to make the world better. Dr. Chen. How did that make you feel? Rebecca. Special. Seen. Like I had a purpose. And then she died, and I spent the rest of my life trying to live up to that moment. But I also learned that the people you love leave, that being special to someone doesn't protect you from losing them. Dr. Chen. So you protected yourself by not letting anyone else see you. If they couldn't see you, they couldn't leave you. The realization hit like a punch to the chest. All those years of being invisible, I thought it was about Dad not noticing me. But really, it was about me choosing invisibility, because visibility meant vulnerability. It meant the risk of being seen and then abandoned again. Dr. Chen helped me see that Dad's inability to express love didn't mean I was unlovable. That being invisible in my family wasn't my fault or my failure. That I could choose differently now, could choose to be seen, could choose to let people in. Rebecca. I spent so long trying to earn his attention by being perfect, and now I find out he was paying attention the whole time, just silently. Dr. Chen. How does that feel, knowing he saw you? Rebecca. Angry, relieved, sad, all of it at once. I'm angry that he made me feel invisible when he could have just told me he was proud. I'm relieved to know I mattered. I'm sad that we wasted so much time, that I'll never get to hear him say these things out loud. Dr. Chen. What are you going to do with all those feelings? Rebecca. I don't know. I have this foundation, this incredible resource to help people, and I'm terrified I'm going to mess it up. What if I'm not good enough? What if I make the wrong funding decisions? Dr. Chen. Your father gave you the foundation because he already approved of you. He already saw your worth. Now you need to see it too. That was the question, wasn't it? What was I going to do with the grief and the anger and the unexpected gift of being seen, too late, by the father I'd thought never noticed me? I decided to use it, to channel everything into the foundation, into making it what Mom had dreamed of and Dad had tried to create. I hired a small staff. Elena, who'd worked in nonprofit management for 15 years and knew how to build infrastructure. Marcus, a different Marcus, who specialized in program evaluation and could help me measure impact. Yuki, a grant writer who could help organizations craft stronger proposals. We set up offices in a modest space in Midtown. I could have afforded something fancier with the foundation's budget, but that felt wrong. The money needed to go to programs, not expensive real estate. I reached out to organizations I'd worked with over the years. The literacy program in Nepal, the girls' school in Uganda, the refugee resettlement network. I asked them what they needed, what difference money could make in their work. The answers were staggering. $100,000 could build a new school wing for 200 students. $50,000 could train 20 teachers. $25,000 could provide scholarships for girls who'd otherwise be married off at 14. We made our first grants 6 months after Dad died. 8 organizations, a total of $800,000. But getting to that point was harder than I'd imagined. The first grant proposal I received was from a small organization in Kenya that wanted to build a primary school in a rural village. They requested $150,000. The proposal was thorough, professional, full of statistics about education access and gender equity. On paper, it was perfect. But I froze. I sat at my desk, staring at the proposal for 3 hours, unable to make a decision. Elena knocked on my door around lunchtime. Elena. Rebecca, you okay in here? Rebecca. I can't do this. What if this isn't the right program to fund? What if there's a better organization doing similar work? Elena sat down across from me, her expression understanding. Elena. You're going to second-guess every decision. That's normal. But you can't let perfect be the enemy of good. This organization has a solid track record. Trust yourself. Rebecca. But what if I'm wrong? Elena. Then you'll learn from it. This is your first grant, not your last. But I wanted to be perfect. I wanted to prove I deserved this responsibility. So I spent 2 weeks researching every education program in East Africa, reading evaluations, comparing budgets, analyzing impact metrics until my eyes burned. I approved the grant to the Kenyan organization. Then I sat at my desk and cried because it felt terrifying and exhilarating to trust my own judgment. Before approving funding, I visited each program. In Nepal, I walked through villages where grandmothers were learning to read for the first time. The literacy program operated out of a small building with concrete floors and walls covered in hand-drawn alphabet charts. I met a woman named Kamala, 68 years old, who'd never been to school a day in her life. She showed me the book she was reading, slowly sounding out each word with a pride that made my throat tight. Kamala. My whole life, I had to ask my son to read letters from my daughter. Now I can read them myself. I can write back. It is like being given eyes after living in darkness. The program director, Priya, explained that $50,000 would let them expand to 3 more villages and train 5 new teachers. Priya, when you teach an adult to read, especially a grandmother, you change the whole family. She helps her grandchildren with homework. She models that learning is possible at any age. I thought about Mom, about how she'd believed education was about learning you matter. These grandmothers were learning exactly that. In Uganda, I sat in classrooms where girls who'd been told they were only good for housework were learning calculus. The school had a waiting list of over 300 students, but only had room for 200. The principal, Grace, showed me the plot of land next to the existing building. Grace, with $100,000, we can build a new wing, 4 additional classrooms, a science lab, and a library. We can take another 100 girls who will become doctors, teachers, engineers. I watched the students during lunch, how they carried themselves with a confidence I'd never had at their age. One girl, maybe 14, approached me shyly. Student, are you the woman from America who might help us build the new school? Rebecca, I'm considering it. What would it mean to you if we did? Student, my younger sister is on the waiting list. She is smarter than me, better at mathematics. If you build the classrooms, she can come here. She can have what I have. Rebecca, and what is it you have? The girl smiled. This bright, certain smile. Student, a future. I have a future now. I approve that grant too. In a refugee center in Jordan, I met a 15-year-old girl named Amira who wanted to be a doctor, but had no way to continue her education. She sat across from me in a small office, her hands folded in her lap. Amira, when we fled Syria, my little brother got sick. Very sick. There was no doctor in the camp. He died because no one was there to help him. I was 12. I held his hand while he died, and I knew then that I would become the doctor I wished had been there for him. Her voice didn't waver. She'd cried all her tears already. Now she had purpose. Rebecca, if we fund this scholarship, it's a commitment of probably $200,000 over 10 years. That's a lot to invest in one person. Amira, I know, and I will make sure it is not wasted. Every life I save, every student I teach, every clinic I open in a refugee camp, that will be my way of honoring this investment. I approved the scholarship. $200,000 for one girl who'd watched her brother die and chose to become a doctor. When I got back to New York, I called a staff meeting. Rebecca, I visited 8 programs in 3 weeks. I met grandmothers learning to read, girls who want to be scientists, a refugee who's going to become a doctor, and I realized the money isn't the hard part. The hard part is trusting that we're making the right choices. And I think we are. So I'm approving all 8 grants. $800,000 in our first round of funding. Marcus whistled. Marcus, that's significant. Are you sure you're ready? Rebecca, no, I'm terrified, but I'm doing it anyway, because these people don't need me to be perfect. They need me to be decisive. The foundation work consumed me in the best possible way. It wasn't the anxious consumption of my old job. This was purpose-driven, meaningful work that made me feel fully alive for the first time. One night, about 8 months after Dad died, I was in the foundation office late, reviewing proposals. My phone rang. Victoria. Victoria. Are you sitting down? Rebecca. What's wrong? Victoria. Nothing's wrong, everything's right. I'm pregnant. Bradley and I were having a baby. I screamed. Actually screamed with joy. This sound I didn't know I could make. My perfect older sister, who'd always seemed too polished to be fully human, was going to be a mother. Victoria. And Becca, I want you to be the godmother, not Amanda, though I love her. You. Because I want my daughter to grow up knowing a woman who measures success by how many lives she's touched, not how much money she's made. My eyes filled with tears. Victoria had never said anything like that to me before. We'd never had this kind of conversation. Rebecca. Victoria, I don't know what to say. I'm honored. Really honored. Victoria. can I tell you something? I've been thinking a lot about Dad, about the inheritance, about all of it, and I realize now that you got the hardest gift. Victoria and I got money we can spend on ourselves. You got responsibility. You got the weight of making decisions that affect hundreds of lives. That's so much harder. Rebecca. But you got $15 million. Victoria. And I'll invest it wisely and probably double it. But in 20 years, what will I have? A bigger bank account. You? You'll have schools and scholarships and changed lives. You'll have meaning. I'm starting to understand that Dad knew exactly what he was doing. We talked for an hour that night. Really talked. Maybe for the first time since we were kids. Victoria told me about her fears about motherhood, about whether she could be nurturing enough, gentle enough. She confessed that she'd built her whole identity around being beautiful and successful, and now she was terrified of becoming someone's mother and losing herself. Rebecca, you won't lose yourself. You'll just expand. You'll be Victoria the businesswoman and Victoria the mother. Both things at once. Victoria, is that what you're doing? Being Rebecca the foundation director, but also still Rebecca the sister and the friend? Rebecca, I'm trying. It's hard. I spent so long being invisible that being visible feels strange. People know my name now. They ask my opinion. They treat me like I matter, and part of me keeps waiting for someone to realize it's a mistake, that I'm still just the forgettable middle daughter. Victoria, Becca, you were never forgettable. We just didn't know how to see you, and that's on us, not you. The conversation shifted something between us. We started talking regularly after that, not just holiday check-ins, but real conversations. Victoria would call to ask my advice about the pregnancy, about baby names, about how to balance work and motherhood. I'd call her when I was struggling with a foundation decision, and she'd help me think through it with her business mind. One day, about 5 months into her pregnancy, she called me crying. Victoria, I had a doctor's appointment today. Everything's fine with the baby, but the doctor asked about my mother, about her medical history, and I realized I barely remember her, Becca. I was 14 when she died, but most of my memories are fuzzy. How am I supposed to be a mother when I don't even remember mine? Rebecca, I have Mom's journals. Dad left them to me. They're full of her thoughts about motherhood, about us, about what she hoped for us. Do you want to read them? The silence on the other end lasted so long I thought the call had dropped. Victoria, he left you Mom's journals? Rebecca, all 12 of them, from when she was 16 until a week before she died. Victoria, and you didn't tell us? Rebecca, I'm telling you now. Come to New York this weekend. Bring Amanda. We'll read them together. That Saturday, my sisters came to my apartment. It was the first time they'd both been there, actually. Victoria looked around at my tiny studio, at the secondhand furniture and the walls covered in photos from my foundation trips, and something in her expression softened. Victoria, this is so you, Becca. It's small, but it's full of purpose. Every picture tells a story. Amanda was already looking at the journals I'd laid out on my coffee table. She picked one up, ran her fingers over Mom's handwriting on the cover. Amanda, can we really read these? They're so personal. Rebecca, Dad wanted me to have them, but Mom would want you to know her too. We should do this together. We spent the whole day reading. Victoria cried when she found entries about her birth, about how Mom had been terrified of motherhood, but the moment she held Victoria, everything made sense. Amanda found entries about her toddler years, about how Mom had loved her wild spirit, her refusal to conform, and there were entries about me, about the dandelion flowers I'd picked when Mom was sick, about how I'd been such a careful, sensitive child, always trying to help, always trying to fix things. One entry, written when I was 6, said, Rebecca watches the world with these big, serious eyes, like she's trying to understand all the pain in it so she can heal it. Sometimes I worry she'll grow up carrying too much, feeling too deeply, but maybe that's her gift. Maybe she'll be the one who makes the world kinder. Victoria read that entry out loud, and when she finished, both my sisters were looking at me with tears in their eyes. Amanda, Mom saw you the same way Dad did. They both knew you were special. The rest of us just needed time to catch up. We made it a monthly tradition after that. Sister's Day, we called it. Sometimes we'd meet at Victoria's place in Boston, walk through the baby nursery she was designing, talk about Mom and Dad and our childhoods. Sometimes we'd meet at Amanda's art therapy practice in Santa Monica, and she'd show us drawings her young clients had made, explain how art helped traumatized kids process their feelings. And sometimes they'd come to New York, visit the foundation office, meet the staff, look at photos from the programs we funded. Victoria used her business expertise to help us think about strategic growth. Amanda helped us design better grant applications that were more user-friendly for organizations that didn't have professional grant writers. They were becoming real sisters to me, not just the perfect older sister and the rebellious younger sister, but full people with their own struggles and gifts. And I was becoming real to them, too. Not the invisible middle child, but Rebecca, the woman running a foundation, changing lives, finding her voice. Amanda brought Sarah to one of our sisters' days, and I loved seeing my rebellious sister so settled and happy. Sarah was a poet who taught creative writing at UCLA, and she had this gentle way of asking questions that made you think deeper. Over lunch at a cafe in Brooklyn, Sarah asked me about the foundation, about how I made decisions about funding. Sarah, how do you choose? When you have limited resources and unlimited need? Rebecca, that's the question that keeps me up at night. I can't fund everything, so I have to prioritize. And every time I say yes to one program, I'm saying no to dozens of others. Sarah, that must be an incredible weight. Rebecca, it is, but it's also a privilege. I get to see the best of humanity, people doing impossible work with almost no resources. I get to amplify their impact. That's worth the wait. Victoria, 7 months pregnant by then, reached across the table and squeezed my hand. Victoria, you know what Dad told me once? He said you were the strongest of all of us because you didn't need anyone else to tell you your worth. You just knew it, somewhere deep down. Rebecca, I didn't know it though. I felt worthless most of my life. Victoria, maybe that's the difference. You felt worthless but kept doing meaningful work anyway. I need constant validation. Amanda needs to rebel against everything to feel alive. But you? You just quietly changed the world because it was the right thing to do, whether anyone noticed or not. Amanda. And now people are noticing. I Googled you last week, Becca. You've been quoted in like 5 major publications. You're becoming a voice in philanthropy. I felt my cheeks heat. It still felt strange, being visible, being known. Rebecca. It's weird. People ask my opinion now. They treat me like an expert. And part of me still feels like I'm faking it, like someone's going to figure out I'm just making this up as I go. Sarah, isn't everyone making it up as they go? The difference is you're doing it while changing lives. That's not faking it, that's leading. Leading. I'd never thought of myself as a leader. Leaders were people like Dad, commanding and confident and always certain of their decisions. But maybe leadership looked different on different people. Maybe my kind of leadership was quieter, more thoughtful, more collaborative. Maybe that was okay. After we hung up, I pulled out the box of letters again. There was one I kept coming back to, written when I was 30, just after I'd started at the International Development Agency. Dear Rebecca, I saw you on the news last night, speaking at a panel about refugee education. You were so articulate, so passionate. You explained complex policy issues in ways that made sense, made people care. I called the TV station to get a recording. I've watched it 5 times. I wanted to call and tell you how brilliant you were, how proud I am, but by the time I worked up the courage, it was 2 in the morning and I didn't want to wake you. This is my pattern, isn't it? Always finding reasons not to reach out, not to say the things I feel. Tomorrow, I'll be busy with a property deal. The day after, I'll convince myself you're too busy to talk. The courage I have right now, at 2 a.m., will evaporate in the daylight. But I need to write this down at least. I need to document that I saw you, that I'm proud, that you're exactly the person I hoped you'd become. I finally understood what Dr. Chen had been trying to tell me. Dad's silence wasn't about me. It was never about me. It was about his own trauma, his own inability to express emotion, his own fear of contaminating something pure with his presence. And I could be angry about that. I had a right to be angry. He was the parent, the one who should have done better, shown up differently. But I could also see him as a full person, flawed and trying and failing and loving me in the only way he knew how. That realization didn't erase the pain of feeling invisible for 32 years, but it did free me from the belief that I was invisible because I wasn't worth seeing. I was worth seeing. I'd always been worth seeing. Dad just didn't have the tools to show me that. A year after Dad died, the foundation held its first annual gala. We invited donors, partner organizations, beneficiaries of our programs. Amira, the girl from Jordan, gave a speech about how the scholarship had changed her life, how she was now in her first year of medical school. Victoria came, 8 months pregnant, with Bradley. Amanda flew in from California with her girlfriend, a woman named Sarah who made her laugh constantly. Maria, who'd become like a mother to all of us in the absence of our own, sat at our family table beaming with pride. I gave a speech that night. I'd practiced it 100 times, But standing at the podium, looking out at 200 people who believed in this work, I forgot half of it. Rebecca. A year ago, I thought I knew who I was. The invisible daughter. The reliable one. The woman who did good work quietly, without recognition, because I believed that was all I deserved. Then my father died, and he left me a letter. Actually, he left me hundreds of letters written over 24 years but never sent. In those letters, I discovered that I'd never been invisible at all. I'd been seen, deeply and completely, by a man who didn't know how to tell me while he was alive. My father gave me this foundation not just as an inheritance, but as a message. He was telling me that the work I'd chosen mattered more than all his business success, that a life of meaning is worth more than a life of money, that I'd gotten it right all along. This foundation exists because he saw me, and now I want to use it to see others, to see the girl in Nepal who dreams of going to school, the refugee family starting over in a new country, the grandmother learning to read at 65, every person whose potential the world overlooks. We see you, and we're here to help you shine. The room stood up. A standing ovation that went on for 5 minutes. I saw Victoria crying, mascara running down her face. Amanda was cheering like she was at a rock concert, and I felt, maybe for the first time in my life, fully present, fully visible, fully myself. After the gala, after everyone left, I went back to Dad's estate. The house was on the market. None of us wanted to keep it, but we hadn't been able to let it go yet either. I walked through the empty rooms, remembering different moments. The kitchen where Maria taught me to make cookies, the living room where we opened Christmas presents, the study where I'd found the letters that changed everything. I sat at Dad's desk and pulled out one more envelope. The last letter in the box, written 2 weeks before he died. Dear Rebecca, I'm running out of time. The doctors say my heart is weaker than they thought. I could have months or I could have days. I keep thinking about all the things I should have said to you, all the conversations we should have had. I'm writing this will, setting up the foundation in your name, trying to make sure you understand. But I know, even as I write these words, that you'll read them and wonder why I couldn't just pick up the phone and tell you while I was alive. The truth is, I'm afraid. Afraid that if I tell you how much you matter, how you've been the daughter who got it right all along, you'll ask why I couldn't show you that sooner, and I won't have a good answer. I was broken, Rebecca. My father was cold and distant, and I swore I'd be different with my own children. But trauma has a way of repeating itself. I became what I hated. I showed love through money and silence instead of words and presence. You deserved better. You deserved a father who could tell you he was proud every single day, who could show up to your events and express his emotions and make you feel valued. Instead, you got me. Emotionally stunted, workaholic, unable to say I love you without it feeling forced and awkward. But I do love you. So much that it terrifies me. You are the best thing I've ever been part of creating. Not my business, not my properties, not my wealth. You. Your kindness. Your purpose. Your ability to see suffering and respond with compassion instead of looking away. That's my legacy. Not the buildings with my name on them, but the daughter who learned to measure success by the lives she touches. Use the foundation to change the world, Rebecca. You don't need my permission. You never did. But I'm giving it anyway. Take these resources and do all the good I was too blind to do. Be the person you already are, just with more tools to make a difference. And please, if you can find it in your heart, forgive me for not telling you any of this to your face. Love, Dad. I folded the letter carefully and put it back in the box with all the others. Then I did something I'd never done before. I spoke to him out loud, to the empty room, to the memory of the complicated man who'd been my father. Rebecca. I forgive you, Dad. I wish you'd told me while you were alive. I wish we'd had more time. But I understand now. You were doing the best you could with the tools you had. And you gave me something incredible. Not just money, but purpose. Not just resources, but permission to be fully myself. I'm going to make you proud. I'm going to use this foundation to change lives. I'm going to be the daughter you saw in those letters. The one you believed in even when I couldn't believe in myself. Thank you for seeing me. Thank you for loving me in the only way you knew how. I love you too. I walked out of that house for the last time that night. We sold it 3 months later to a family with 4 kids who promised to fill it with laughter and chaos and life. The kind of life it should have always had. 3 years have passed since Dad died. The foundation has distributed over $4 million to programs in 12 countries. We've built schools and trained teachers and provided scholarships to hundreds of kids who'd otherwise have no chance at education. Victoria had her daughter, Emma, and I'm the godmother. I visit them in Boston every month, and we're building a relationship that's real, not performative. We talk about meaningful things now. She tells me about the challenges of balancing work and motherhood. I tell her about the impossible decisions of which programs to fund when there's never enough money for all the need in the world. Amanda and Sarah got married last year in a beautiful ceremony on the beach in Malibu. I was her maid of honor. During the reception, she pulled me aside and told me she'd been reading Mom's journals, the ones Dad had left me. Amanda. Mom wrote about how she hoped we'd all find our paths. She said Victoria would build things, I would create things, and you would heal things. She was right. Rebecca. I'm not healing anything. I'm just funding programs. Amanda. Becca, you're healing exactly what Dad broke. You're proving that success doesn't have to mean emotional distance. You can have resources and still have purpose. You can have power and still have compassion. You're healing the damage of our childhood by becoming everything he couldn't be. I think about that conversation a lot, about the idea that I'm healing something, not just for the people our foundation serves, but for myself, for my family, for the broken patterns that have repeated through generations. Last month, I went back to Uganda to visit the school we'd helped expand. They named a building after my mother, the Rebecca Henderson Memorial Library. Inside, there's a plaque with her picture, one Dad must have provided, and a quote from one of her journal entries. The quote reads, "Education is not just about learning facts. It's about learning you matter, that your voice counts, that you have something to offer the world." I stood in front of that plaque for a long time, watching girls stream in and out, carrying books, studying together, laughing. These girls mattered. Their voices counted. They had so much to offer the world. And our foundation was helping them realize that. I thought about my own journey, about being the invisible daughter who spent 32 years believing she didn't matter, about finding out, too late, that her father had seen her all along, about learning to forgive him for his silence and forgive myself for believing I was invisible. I pulled out my phone and took a picture of the plaque. Then I sent it to Victoria and Amanda with a simple message. Mom would be proud. Victoria responded immediately. She'd be proud of all of us, but especially you. Amanda sent a string of heart emojis and then, "You found your path, Becca. You're exactly where you're supposed to be." Standing in that library, in a school full of girls who were learning they mattered, I realized something. I'd spent so much of my life waiting to be seen, waiting for someone to notice me and tell me I was valuable. But visibility isn't something someone else gives you. It's something you claim for yourself. Dad's letters didn't make me visible. They just showed me I'd always been visible to the people who mattered. And more importantly, they gave me permission to stop hiding, to stop playing small, to step into my full power and use it to change lives. The dusty letter I'd broken down over in that conference room 3 years ago wasn't just an inheritance. It was an invitation. An invitation to stop being the invisible daughter and start being the woman who sees others, who uses her resources and her voice and her power to make the invisible visible. I'm 35 now. I run a $30 million foundation. I have real relationships with my sisters. I'm in therapy working through decades of feeling unseen. I'm dating someone, a teacher named Michael, who works at a school in Harlem and understands what it means to choose meaning over money. We're taking it slow, but for the first time, I'm not afraid of letting someone in. I still read Dad's letters sometimes when I need to remember that I mattered to him, but I don't need them the way I used to, because I know I matter, not because of what he left me, but because of what I'm doing with it. Last week, I got an email from Amira, the girl from Jordan. She's graduating from medical school next year. She sent me a picture of herself in a white coat, stethoscope around her neck, the biggest smile I've ever seen. Her email said, "Thank you for seeing me when the world looked away. I will spend my life doing the same for others." That's the inheritance that matters. Not the money in the bank account, not the letters in the box, not even the buildings with plaques. It's the lives changed, the potential unlocked, the girls who learn they matter and go on to teach others the same lesson. I think Dad finally understood that, at the end. He'd spent his whole life building an empire of bricks and mortar, but his real legacy was the foundation he created in my name, the one that's not about buildings at all, but about building people up. At the will reading, my sisters celebrated their millions, and I broke down over a dusty letter. They thought they'd won. They thought they'd gotten the real inheritance. But I'm the one who got the gift that keeps giving. Not money to spend on myself, but purpose. Not wealth to hoard, but resources to share. Not just my father's legacy, but the chance to create my own. I was never the invisible daughter. I was the daughter who learned to see what really matters. And now I'm teaching the world to see it too.